IT companies, of course, in India have borne the most amount of the brunt in the recent past on account of those Trump tariff announcements, not on account of a direct impact, but because of the impact that is likely on the US economy. Mastech is one of those companies which is seeing the impact of tariffs along with the abolition of its key client NHS England. What does this mean for the company and what's the path ahead? Let's bring in Puneet to tell you something more before we speak to the management. Puneet?
Well, thanks for that. So definitely, the Trump tariff impact having an indirect impact essentially on IT companies, and most brokerages have been maintaining that a slower economy or a mild recession as well might impact the decision making for the companies to spend more on IT as a consumer discretionary angle. That's the first key reason that we're speaking to the management. There's just three key things that we'd want to know about. The first one's, of course, the US share. Now, for Mastech, it's around 28.3% US exposure. Roughly, the UK and Europe is the biggest exposure for the company at 56%. So, what kind of impact are they anticipating in terms of US revenue going forward, and also on the onshoring as well? The company has roughly about 5,600 odd employees, 5,200 odd employees, and out of that, 3,600 are based in India. Does that mean that because of the tariffs, there'll be a lot of onshoring in the US or in the UK is what they're anticipating? I think that was one key aspect. And on NHS specifically, because, we had brokerages like HDFC come out with notes specifying that, NHS UK has now been merged essentially with a smaller department, which is the Department of Health and Social Care. How does that impact the contracts for something like Mastech? Because healthcare vertical is around 22% for the company's revenue in terms of, the split, as well as in the UK, which is the bigger market. That is something that, we'd want to know as well going forward. So these two key aspects of both these countries will be something to watch out for from the management in this particular conversation.
Thank you for that setup, Puneet. Ashank Desai, chairman of Mastech, with us. Ashank, I must say, great pleasure speaking with you after a while, and glad to have you on NDTV Profit.
Great to see you after a long time.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think very important time for this conversation as well. So let me start with, the broad understanding of the panic. Of course, we're seeing panic from investor point of view in IT stocks, a lot of uncertainty out there. How are you viewing it as someone who has seen so many cycles? Is what we're seeing right now as a threat to the sector in terms of what happens to the US economy the biggest yet?
As you rightly said, I have seen these cycles for last 40 years since we started Mastech, and we all started NASCOM also 35 years here. And we have seen these cycles coming up and coming down, and its impact on the IT industry. So if you look at it from that lens, obviously a good economy does help us because there is definitely a good discretionary spending that happens. However, you must know that even in the cases of recession, there has been an increase in the demand for IT industry because of the offshore work that we do, which is a cost saving. So, whenever there is a recession, there is a cost cutting in economy. Again, there is a demand which happens more for the offshore kind of work. So, the impact of these fluctuations on IT industry has not been some violent and really large. There is a positive impact, there is a negative side, but it gets calibrated because of the opposing forces of doing more work offshore and so on. So if I put it all that together and look at some of the things that are happening in US, I am not kind of over concerned in terms of what would impact on the IT industry. Because some of the changes that administration is doing also are going to be positive in terms of tax cuts and so on, what they are saying, which they have not done so far. But that would increase the discretionary spend. And come back to tariff, which of course everybody is discussing. To my mind, we don't know what is its impact. Of course, there are administrations saying it is going to be positive, but it may be a little bit in the medium term, and negative may come immediately. So what I'm saying is we need to be cautious about what would happen in terms of...
Unfortunately, the audio line you are on is a little patchy. I know you're joining us from your webcam. May I request you to speak a little louder? I'm so sorry for this.
Okay.
So that our viewers can actually understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now better?
This is better. This is actually better. So okay, let me come to the follow-up. I get the point that fears of recession lead to lower discretionary spends. Hence, it's looking tough for Indian IT companies. What is the pivot in that case? What is the action plan? Do you just wait for this storm to pass, or what do you do next? I'm just wondering, what are you thinking strategically?
No, let me complete then what I said. Maybe that was not heard. What I said is, if there is a recession or there is an economic pressure, there is a demand for offshore which happens because of cost saving that happens because of offshoring. So there is a countervailing force if there is a recession, and that kind of balances some of the impact and doesn't make it so negative as everybody thinks. So that's the reason I am saying that we should be cautious about it, but let us not get over negative reaction about what will happen in US economy. That is the first point I made. I'm saying it is discretionary spend may have impact, but there will be positive impact in terms of what may happen in terms of cost cutting. And that is good for Indian IT industry. We do that for American economy. So that's the plus point I'm saying. So let's not get over concerned is the point I'm making. The second one that I'm saying is that the whole issue of tax cuts and so on, which are going to happen hopefully over a period of time, would have a positive impact too. That will be a discretionary spend which will increase. Now that has not happened. When it will happen, we don't know all of that. So I'm saying if you put all of them together, I don't know whether we should be so over concerned what will happen to Indian IT industry because of US changes. That's the point I'm making.
But Mr. Desai, good morning, Neeraj here. If the idea also is to create jobs in the US, which is Donald Trump's pet theme, would it not in fact hit Indian IT companies, if not in business, then in terms of personnel hiring and therefore costs?
See, Neeraj, the whole issue is if you want to retain jobs in US, it is not as if Indian IT companies are not hiring in US. Let us be clear. All of us have almost 25 to 30% of our employees working in those countries. And we end up hiring local talent, which is Indian citizens and local citizens, if I may call them. And so to that impact, the kind of work that we are doing is not 100% done here. There is sufficient work done offshore, and we do create jobs in all of those countries. So that's point one. Point two is, let us realize that there is a shortage of demand in IT. Let us be absolutely clear. If there is a pressure on doing jobs in the US, there is going to be a pressure from corporations to stop the work. They have to do it somewhere. That's the point I'm making. If there is going to be pressure for the talent, then the work moves offshore because that's where talent is available. So the point I'm making is some of these issues that we make about jobs, about recession, there is a fungibility across this talent and the demand and the work because of our offshore model. And that allows us to be flexible enough and our customers to be flexible enough to work across and see that their work is getting done. That's the point I'm making. We have perfected this model over the last 35, 40 years as an IT industry. And that is why it is giving a stability and growth to all of us. Let's not forget that. There are cycles and cycles that have happened in Europe. We had 2008. Did we get into a lot of difficulty? Yes, we had a little bit of down, obviously, in the industry, but we surged back. We had .com, of course, many years ago, and so on. So the point I'm making is there is a resilient business model that we have built over many years and perfected. It got tested in COVID area. How even if there was no hiring in offshore, we could deliver to our customer by doing work offshore. And not offshore working at home. You see, that's the point.
So then let me ask you, sir, how, so yes, it may be cyclical, trying to understand that if we are in a down cycle right now because of slower decision making, etc., how prolonged could this down cycle be? It may pick up later on, but could this last 6, 9 months, 12 months, or 18 months, or is it difficult to say?
You mean down cycle of US economy?
And no, and just the business coming to companies. I mean, the belief right now is that US economy decision making, corporate decision making would be slow, ordering activity would be slow, and therefore Indian companies, the sector growth probably pegged at 3-4% for FY26. How prolonged could this cycle be, according to you?
See, I think we should decouple this 3, 4, 5, 6% growth which has happened over the last 2 years with the recession and economic issues. Then we will get a better perspective. What really happened was during COVID, there was a great demand to go do IT work because nothing was happening physically. So people spent money and Indian industry did well, as all of you know, Neeraj. Because of that, there was an overspend on IT in those 2-3 years, and hence there was a calibration that has happened over the last 2 years. So that's the bigger point as far as the slowness of IT industry over the last 2 years. So it has nothing to do with economy, as you know. Now, if economy doesn't do well, I'm repeating that point again. The impact of that is not all negative. It is negative to the extent of discretionary spend, but it is positive in terms of what can be done offshore. So the point I'm making is, let's not get over concerned in terms of negative impact, because it is going to be calibrated with something which happens offshore. And that is what created all this permanency of growth in IT industry over the last 25 years. We have never gone negative, right? We have always grown year after year, whatever has happened in US economy or in a global economy.
Okay.
Why? Because there is this, what I would call a...
Sure. Okay, Mr. Desai, can we come... Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Can we come to Mastech specifically and what that means for you? Would it be seen as a bit of a relief that most of your revenue is coming in from Europe and UK, not so much US? You're relatively less dependent. Or do you see the overspill impacting you as well? I mean, you're 59, close to 60% of your revenue is coming from US and from UK and Europe.
Yes. Yeah, to that extent, we are less impacted if there is going to be any impact. That's absolutely clear. Indian IT industry, 65%. We are not that impacted by US. That's a fact, and that's a good side of Mastech specifically. You are right.
Okay, and from the UK perspective specifically, what they have done recently with the NHS, where they want to restructure it and merge it. NHS, if I'm not mistaken, is 22% of your revenue from the region. NHS is a big client for you, the National Health Service there. Just explain to us what impact that has. I
think we don't disclose company-wise markets revenue. And 22% that we talked about is healthcare as a sector, for Mastech as a company.
Not NHS.
We do work in US also for healthcare with hospitals and payers. And we work in US, as you know, UK. So it's a total number, 22%. That is the sector, not a particular customer. So that's point one. Point two, coming to NHS. See, the whole issue is NHS has been going through restructuring over the last 3 or 4 years. There was a time when there was what is called as NHS Digital, which got merged into NHS England. And that did not impact us so greatly because the work and contracts were kept as it is. Only the work was rescheduled and we continued to work. And as you know, we continued our growth in healthcare over the last 3-4 years, in spite of structural change in NHS. So that's point one. Now that point has gone one level above now, when NHS England and NHS is now moved to, as you said, HSSC. We do not see that as a negative impact because the continuation of the contracts will continue in new organizations. There will be, of course, new decision makers, there will be new people that will be involved in decisions. But the existing contracts and what we have a pipeline, that work doesn't get changed. There is no impact on IT spend because of this change in structure. Is what I want to make it clear. And we had a press release given on that, giving the details. So that's the larger point about the NHS that we are talking about. So we have seen this cycle earlier. We have passed through that cycle. This is moving up again, and we will take in stride that.
No, so let me reiterate this. The merging of NHS into health services doesn't make any immediate impact to you because you're expecting those contracts to carry over with the new entity.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of outlook, and I know you're yet to report Q4, but what I have in front of me is, of course, Q3. Do you think that you are going to see another tough quarter because Q3 was also fairly rough?
I think we are so close to the results. I would not like to talk.
No, of course, which is why I'm not asking you about numbers.
We are less than 2 weeks away from the result announcement. So I would not make any comments as such on specific results. Whatever guidance we have given during our investor call, we will continue with that, as there is not any change compared to that.
Okay.
We had pressure Q3, but please remember that was on the back of Q2, which was a very good quarter for us. So in some of our businesses, when there is a discretionary spend, you must remember that it is not just an outsourcing contract. We do large mission critical projects. Between some of the project completions, some of these issues can change the revenue over from quarter to quarter. The better way to look at it is year-on-year growth, if you ask me really. And we have done better than industry in terms of year-on-year growth, as we have announced it. In terms of order book, which is more than upper end of teams, and also the revenue year-on-year growth. If you look even at Q3.
Okay. Mr. Desai, one final question from my end. 2025 is sieged with worries on AI impact on the IT sector and maybe some of the business being taken away, and now this. Is this a combination of two which brings about a cycle which is in perception, if not in reality, the weakest that you would have seen in the last many years, or is this one of the many that you believe you will sail through?
As I said again, we have
you will sail through. Okay.
We have seen these cycles year after year. There was a cycle of what we call is moving from mainframe to Unix, then Unix from the client to client server, from client server to the whole issue of what has happened in terms of infrastructure and digital movement and so on. So some of these changes, of course, bring some uncertainty. I am not saying, I don't want to completely say there is nothing changes. And AI does bring a discontinuity. I am not denying that, but it is again positive part of it also could be seen. Today, I am getting the applications that I would not have done without AI. As I speak, we work in healthcare and few other industries where AI is used. And if there was no AI, I would not have got that contract.
Okay.
There is this new applications which are getting built.
Sure.
Which is what happened.
Sure. Okay. We'll catch up again, Mr. Desai. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much. The word coming from a veteran of the industry is that Indian IT is more resilient than it seems right now. What also may boost hopes of a climb down is what President Trump said on board Air Force One.